Florida homeowners may soon pay no property tax at all if voters approve a proposal by Governor Ron DeSantis.
Florida has always been the ultimate tax haven for Americans. It's because there's no state income tax. But if you actually live there, you know there's a catch, and that's property taxes.
Reality is the property tax has become a big burden for millions of people.
Local governments in Florida rake in roughly $55 billion a year from property taxes to fund everything from schools to police to parks. But on June 2nd, 2026, the Florida legislature did something historic, something that could fundamentally change the economics of the Sunshine State. They passed a proposal that can legally erase property taxes for the majority of homeowners. It's called House Joint Resolution 1-F, and if 60% of Florida voters say yes this November, it will trigger the largest property tax cut in the state's history. But if you look closely at the math and what happens to the billions of dollars that suddenly go missing, this stops being a simple tax cut. It becomes a massive high-stakes experiment in how society pays for itself. First, we need to talk about how it works right now. If you own a primary residence in Florida, you get a homestead exemption on your taxes. The first $50,000 of your home's assessed value is shielded from property taxes. But under this new constitutional amendment, that exemption doesn't just go up, it skyrockets. In 2027, that shield will jump to $150,000. By 2028, it hits $250,000. And then from there on, it automatically adjusts for inflation every single year. Right now, you might be thinking, hey, my house is worth over $1 million. A $250,000 exemption won't wipe out my bill. But here's the crazy part. This applies to your assessed value, not your market value. Thanks to Florida's existing laws, longtime homeowners have their assessed values capped already, so they don't grow as fast as the wild real estate market. Because of this, the governor's office estimates that roughly 60% of homesteaded Floridians will owe absolutely zero on non-school property taxes once the $250,000 threshold is reached. But wait, you just heard me say the phrase non-school. That's because when lawmakers were drafting this, they ran into a massive roadblock. Public schools get the largest single share property tax revenue in Florida. If you wipe that out, the entire education system collapses. So in a special session, lawmakers deliberately carved school taxes out of the bill. No matter how big your exemption gets, you will still pay the school portion of your tax bill. But even with schools protected, this tax cut is a financial earthquake for local governments. We are talking about wiping out more than $8.4 billion a year in funding for cities and counties. Let's just take Hillsborough County, for example. This is where Tampa is. Preliminary estimates show that they could lose $478 million in a single year. Over a decade, that's about $1 billion. Local leaders are panicking, and opponents of the bill are asking a very simple question. If property taxes aren't paying for roads, trash collection, parks, and police, well then who is? Critics argue this isn't a tax cut at all. It's a tax shift. If cities lose billions of dollars, they might have to hike up their user fees for basic services. And this brings us to another massive group of people in Florida who are watching this very nervously. I'm talking about renters. Roughly 1/3 of Florida households rent their homes. This massive $250,000 exemption will only apply to primary residences. If local governments are starved for cash, they might be forced to shift the tax burden onto non-homestead properties like apartment buildings and commercial real estate. And if you are a landlord facing higher fees or a shift in tax burden, what do? Well, you raise your rent. And check out this one more genius, or maybe I dare to say diabolical piece to this legislation. If I'm sitting in New York right now and I hear Florida is about to give away a $250,000 property tax exemption, I am calling the moving company right away. The Florida legislation knew this would trigger a migration frenzy, so they built in a firewall. If you establish Florida residency after December 31st, 2026, you do not get this super exemption right away. You are stuck with the old $50,000 exemption for the first 5 years that you're in the state. They want to protect current residents while making newcomers wait in line to reap in the benefits. So here's where we stand right now in June of 2026 while I'm recording this. On November 3rd of 2026, Florida voters are going to step into the ballot box and they're going to answer a fundamentally philosophical question. This vote needs a 60% supermajority to pass. If you are a homeowner, you are looking at saving an average of $1,500 to $1,800 every single year. It is an incredible financial relief for families who might have been crushed by the rising cost of living. But if you look at the macro picture, you are watching a state intentionally drain billions of dollars from its own local infrastructure. So here's my question that I propose. Is Florida about to become the ultimate utopia for low-tax home ownership? Or is it about to bankrupt its own cities to do it? Well, the voters are going to decide November 3rd. And by the way, if you're thinking about moving to Southeast Florida before the deadline of December 31st of 2026, or reach out to me and the Homestead by Cusi team, because we'll love to help.